My boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when he made his twin brother go to our first date as a joke. Obviously, I didn't even know he was a twin. So when this guy shows up to the restaurant, I'm like, oh hey. 15 minutes into the date, he starts laughing maniacally. That's when my real date comes out of the bathroom, and they both start pointing and laughing at me. That's when I understood what was going on. My real date sent his twin brother. Here's the thing, they look exactly the same. They even have the same moles in the same places, same exact haircut, and they even have the same tattoo on their necks. And they're both really hot. Their bodies are sculpted to a T, and their faces look like Greek gods. Finally, his brother left, and it was just me and my date. We hit it off and had a great time. Everything was really rushed though. A week later, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I didn't know what to say. He begged me for about 3 days. When I finally said yes, I told him that it was on a trial basis. That's when odd things started happening. He once again started sending his brother on dates with me. After I'd get home from a date, he would text me to say, how's my brother? I kept falling for it. Part 3 is, my boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I finally asked my boyfriend to stop sending his brother on dates with me. He said that it was just too funny and that they both thought it was hilarious. So I asked him if he was getting off on the idea of me and his brother together. Then he said, why? Would you like that? And I said, of course not. I like you, not your brother. Then he said, but we're exactly the same. Then he says, what if you already did it with my brother and you just don't know it? It actually took me a minute to think about it. I mean, how could I know? They both look exactly the same. At this point, I had given my boyfriend a key to my apartment. Big mistake. Later on that night, I'm dead asleep in bed. I hear my door open and I see that it's my boyfriend. Or at least who I thought was my boyfriend. He climbs into my bed and we have sex. I'm half asleep, but I was still open to it. The next morning, he's gone. I call my boyfriend and ask him why he left. Then he says, what are you talking about? I was never in your apartment. I literally could have shat my bed. Then he said, you actually fell for it? That wasn't me, that was my brother. That's when he asked me if I would be open to a relationship with the two of them. Apparently, his brother is obsessed with me. What should I do? My boyfriend tricked me into having sex with his twin brother. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. It's on my Instagram. My boyfriend is the most obnoxious man I've ever met. We started dating 3 months ago. When I met him, I really wasn't into him at all. I met him through friends, and when we would all hang out, he was always the loudest one. He was always making the most inappropriate jokes and was always seeking attention from everyone else. I'm the complete opposite. I like to listen to people speak. I never raise my voice and I don't try to be obnoxiously loud. So I thought he was the biggest piece of shit when I met him. I couldn't relate at all to him. Then he came up to me at a party and started talking to me. That's when I found out that we had a lot of things in common. One of the things that we kept talking about was role-playing. I'm into role-playing, but I like to keep it safe. Whereas he likes to do some crazy stuff. He's into things like rape fantasies. I told him I was not interested in that, but we kept seeing each other through friends. Finally, after about a month, he asked me out on a date and I said yes. At this point, I knew that he was loud and obnoxious, but he was funny and made me laugh all the time. And I love a guy that can make me laugh. On our first date, he sent his twin brother as a joke. Thought it was hilarious that I confused them. Part 2. Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sent me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, can I kiss you? And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2. Story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Was sent me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, but you didn't say no. I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, no, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth. That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slowly slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, please come to our house now. He responded right away saying, I'm coming over. After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah blah blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers on my Storytime instead of me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, yeah, of course. And he told him, you're drunk, I'm gonna take you home now. They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner. And I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house. And one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front. So they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said it's not like I'm following you, which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think? My best friend always projects her insecurities onto me. Should I break up with her? My best friend and I have known each other for exactly 2 years. We met in college and hit it off right away. We're both Latinas and we come from really big families. I have 2 other sisters and we get along really well. We always hype each other up and have each other's backs. A few months after I started my friendship with my best friend, let's call her Lucia. Lucia started showing some really toxic qualities. Sometimes I think I'm just reading too much into it or overreacting. So you let me know. First of all, she would start talking bad about my sisters in front of me. She would make comments like, wow, your sister's gained weight, or wow, your sister has cellulite. When she first did this, I would just defend my sisters, but then I realized that that just made her want to keep talking more trash. So if she ever said anything about my sisters, I wouldn't say anything. At the time our friendship started, I had a really big crush on this guy. He and I went to the same gym and I never had the courage to speak to him, not until my sister convinced me to. I finally spoke to him at the gym and we actually hit it off. We would work out together every now and then and he finally asked me out on a date. The day of our date, my best friend came over to my house, and while I was getting ready, she started saying really weird things. At first, she told me that I should wash my hair because it looked oily. I told her my hair was freshly washed. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I could see her reflection and she just rolled her eyes at me. This is when things started clicking. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my jealous husband? That's when he started coming into my office to flirt with me. He would compliment everything about me. He would tell me that I had a great body, that I had a beautiful face. I know that he could visibly see how uncomfortable it made me, but he kept going. Of course, it never occurred to me to tell my husband because of how violent he gets when he's jealous. And he knew that, which is why he kept pushing it. One day, my husband and him went to a local bar after finishing up work at home. When they came home, my husband was completely wasted. My brother-in-law put my husband in our bed and told me that I should get him some water. I went down to the kitchen to grab my husband a bottle of water, but my brother-in-law followed me into the kitchen, cornered me up against the fridge and tried to kiss me. By the way, I could smell the alcohol on him, so I knew he was drunk. I pushed him away and told him not to touch me. That's when he started apologizing. He said, I thought you wanted it. As I started walking away, he grabbed my arm and kissed me. But the truth is, part of me liked it. Truthfully, I always found my brother-in-law very attractive. By the way, it's not like I just let him kiss me. I was trying to fight him off. When he let me go, I slapped him and I ran upstairs. Of course, I avoided him after that. A few days later, I was having dinner with my friends when my brother-in-law shows up at the restaurant and sits at a table right across from us. Proceeded to just stare at me the whole time. Finally got up to the bathroom and he followed me. That's when he grabbed me and kissed me again. Part 3 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. We have a really big group of friends and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First, he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. My brother-in-law keeps trying to hook up with me. Should I tell my husband? My husband is a very, very jealous man. He can't stand it when I get hit on or even stared at. The few times that I've gotten hit on in front of him, he actually started a fight with the guy. So I basically live in fear of anybody hitting on me in front of him. He's also very jealous with our friends. I have a really big group of friends and a lot of them are males. He's outright told our male friends to not touch me or ever even hug me or kiss me when they see me. By the way, a lot of these guys are already married and in relationships. So the fact that my husband does that is just ridiculous. It's obviously humiliating to me. The only person my husband is not jealous of is his own brother. And at first I thought this was a good thing. His brother offered to move in with us while we were renovating our house. My husband and him basically work all day on the house. I get to work from home, so I'm usually in my own office. A few weeks ago, my brother-in-law started coming into my office. First, he would just talk to me, and then it turned into flirting. Then he started insinuating how good-looking I was, how lucky my husband is. Part 2 is up. I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer is not my story time. Instead of me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, "If I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me." Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too. And then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is